Morning, everyone. My name is Bryanna Entwistle, and I'm a press and program officer at the Asia Society Policy Institute, where I research and write about Southeast Asia. Today, I am joined by three excellent panelists who will unpack the Thai-Cambodia border dispute and its broader implications for the region. Now, sections of the 817-kilometer-long Thai-Cambodia border and the Khmer Hindu temples along it have been disputed for over a century, since the French colonized Cambodia. Tension rose rapidly on May 28th of this year when Cambodian and Thai soldiers exchanged gunfire, resulting in the death of a Cambodian soldier at Chongbuk, an undemarcated part of the Emerald Triangle where the borders of Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos meet. In the days and weeks afterwards, the Thai and Cambodian militaries took turns bolstering their troop presence along the border, shutting down border checkpoints and halting trade. On June 18th, Thai Prime Minister Pang Thongthorn Shinawatra was suspended after a call with former Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen was leaked, in which she appeared to condemn the Thai military's actions along the border. Open fighting then broke out between Thai and Cambodian soldiers on July 24th, close to the Prasat Tamon Tom temple. Within hours, fighting had spread to other parts of the border, and both armies deployed heavy weaponry, including airstrikes, artillery shelling, and tanks. The fighting lasted for about 5 days before a ceasefire was brokered, displacing over 300,000 and killing at least 38, including civilians, on both sides of the border. Thai and Cambodian officials are currently on the ground in Malaysia for another round of ceasefire talks. Yet tensions remain high, nationalist rhetoric continues, and troops have maintained their presence on either side of the border. Today, I am joined by three fantastic experts who will help us analyze the roots of the conflict, the ceasefire, implications for ASEAN, and the future of Thai-Cambodia politics. Joining from a town near the Thai side of the border is journalist and academic Supalak Ganjanakhundee, who is an advisor to the Thai House of Representatives Military Committee. He is a former editor of The Nation newspaper in Thailand and served as a visiting fellow in the Thailand Studies program at the Iseas Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore. Joining bright and early from Arizona is Sophal Ear, associate professor and former senior associate dean in the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. Sophal is a survivor of the Cambodian genocide, a renowned expert on Cambodian politics, and the author of several books. Finally, we have Benjamin Zawacki, who is usually based out of Bangkok, but is joining us today from Virginia. Benjamin is a senior program specialist at the Asia Foundation, where he helps to manage programs on regional maritime and cybersecurity, ASEAN, the Mekong River, and the U.S.-Thailand relationship. He is the author of Thailand, Shifting Ground Between the U.S. and a Rising China. Thank you so much to all the panelists for being here this morning. I'm looking forward to a great discussion and can't wait to jump in. Audience members, we will have a Q&A towards the end of our session, and you can submit questions for our panelists in the Q&A box below. Now, Supalak, turning first to you. You live in the Thai border district of Katha and had to evacuate your home on July 24th when heavy fighting erupted just miles away near Prevahir Temple, the site of the 2008 to 2011 border conflict, which we will touch on later. Can you walk us how things escalated between the shooting on May 28th, as well as what happened and what the fighting involved before the ceasefire was brokered?
Let me begin in this way in order to make you some sense of the conflict with Cambodia. Actually, this conflict never happened out of the blue. Actually, it began last year when a group of the right-wing national movement to oppose the Thai government plan to resume negotiation on maritime deal with Cambodia to exploit and share profit from the jointly development of the hydrocarbon resource in the Gulf of Thailand. So they accused the government of conflict of interest because Hun Sen family and Thaksin family has a deep connection with Cambodian leader and possible the loss of territory, particularly Gorgus Islands in the Gulf of Thailand. There is a kind of like unnecessary conflict broke up at the Tamon Hindu temple in Surin province when Thai soldiers prohibit a group of Cambodian people, apparently the military sprout from singing. And what kind of song they're singing, but we interpret it like a Khmer national anthem or a patriotic song, because the military accused them of expressing national symbolic in Thai territory. That's a very strong accusation that made by Thai official against Cambodian people when expressing the things in Thai territory, so-called Thai territory. Actually, that area is still undemarcated territory. Another incident, the sense of the border tension emerged in April and May when a Thai soldier found drag trench in the dispute area of Chongbok in Ubon Ratchathani, Namyuen district. And after the May 28th clash, I saw more visibility of truth in my areas. A few weeks later, I saw also they set up their outposts in the village, and I need to emphasize some of them in the temple, Buddhist temple in our village, and began to place artillery. Which one of them, I can say that stationed some 700 or 800 meters away from my house. And during that time, villagers and my family were briefed about the evacuation plans in case of we have some situation. We have briefed where to go and the safe route to our shelters. I myself also decided to build a bunker in our farm because I live a bit isolated from the village. In Thailand, we say something. They have a group of a village somewhere, and when people doing farm activity, they have to fall away from the village. So I decided to have a house within the farm. So I built the bunker there near my house. It is big enough for 7 or 8 people, and we really use it, have a chance to use it in the morning of July 24th when the armed conflict broke up. I stay in the bunker for 2 hours from 8:30 to 10:30 until the end of artillery fire exchange. We move further to downtown of Kantalalak district and passing the rocket hit gas station PTT, as you perhaps saw in the news, and why the a convenience store in that gas station was under fire. And I stay in downtown of the Kantalak district for 3 hours before another round of rocket from Cambodia land near a crowded and urban area where, again, I need to say this, police and military camps are located in that location. So perhaps, I don't know, the rocket from Cambodia perhaps intentionally land in that area in order to hit the military camp or security officer camp. After the round of attack, I decided again to move further to another safer place, and finally I end up in what I call Ubon Ratchathani downtown, about 100 kilometers from my house, and I stayed there until a group of diplomats organized by Thai authorities to visit the affected sites. Also, one of them near my house. I returned back into the house and take a quick look at my properties and found that some sharp nail of the perhaps I think artillery shells hit my paralabor tree. I mean, some of them perhaps more than 10, and I decided to stay outside that area again because the heads of the village also informed us not to stay overnight in your place because the situation is not in a calm situation, and security is thing like a worrisome. So at the end, until now, I move again to my another house in Bangkok now, where I sitting talk to you. This is a generation I walked through that I maybe in this round of talk I would just say that this conflict perhaps began from Thailand side first, and later Cambodia respond in another way that try to have some sense of the provocative in order to call attention from international community in order to refer the case of 3 or 4 locations of undemarcated territory to the International Court of Justice, which its jurisdictions reject by Thailand. So I think this is the kind of sense of conflict that I feel.
Thank you, Supalak. I appreciate that, and I'm glad your family is safe and that you were able to join us today.
Yeah, I'm good now.
Good. I'm glad, and hopefully the ceasefire will hold. All right, so Paul, turning to you. As Supalak pointed to this, the Thai-Cambodia border conflict is nothing new. Disputes over several Hindu Khmer temples and surrounding territory date back to a map drawn by the French in 1907. Can you talk about the factors that have fueled the dispute over the past century? What were the flashpoints before this iteration of the conflict, and how did it get so bad this time around?
Thank you, Bryanna. In answering this question, I want to think about or talk about 3 things: historical factors, previous flashpoints, and the question of why now in particular. And so in terms of historical factors, the roots of the Thai-Cambodian border conflict really lie in the ambiguities and inconsistencies of colonial era mapping, particularly the 1907 French-drawn Annex 1 map, which placed the Prevahia Temple on the Cambodian side of the border. While the International Court of Justice ruled in Cambodia's favor in 1962 and again clarified its position in 2013, the practical demarcation of adjacent land has remained unresolved. So when you talk about the 800 plus kilometers, that remains, right? So one part of that, the Prevahia Temple, has been ruled upon twice now by the International Court of Justice, but the rest of it hasn't, and so it's a constant flashpoint. And so in terms of previous flashpoints, there have been major flare-ups that have occurred from 2008 to 2011, leading to military clashes around Prevahia. That was over a decade ago, culminating in both fatalities and significant destruction. These earlier skirmishes were driven by nationalist politics in both countries, coupled with poor military-to-military communication. And you kind of see that happening again with the leak of the phone call that essentially ended communications as a result, because who does that in diplomacy, right? Who leaks phone calls, recording phone calls, that's pretty common nowadays, but to leak it is really provocative. And now, the real question of why now, what made the 2025 iteration different was, I think, and first of all, I want to say the Supalak's arguments are absolutely correct, and his interpretation I agree with, was that the intertwining of elite family dynamics, which he's already referred to, with national politics and social media driven nationalism. I mean, you see this in the number of posts that are just very much rallying around the flag and pushing for a kind of nationalistic argument. And former Prime Minister Hun Sen, who is now the Cambodian Senate President's decision, as I mentioned, to leak this private phone call. So I think the sequence was the then Prime Minister of Thailand called him. He missed the call. Then he called her private line to return the call. And of course, that's where the recording took place. So again, this was an unprecedented diplomatic provocation to leak a phone call of the Prime Minister of Thailand calling you or being called upon, and then first it was like a 9-minute leak that came out. Nobody knows who actually leaked that part, but he said that Hun Sen said that he had shared it with 80 people, the recording. So one of the 80 folks, or maybe somebody who shared it from the 80 folks, sent it onwards, but it ruptured personal trust. And when he later in the day, Hun Sen then shared the entire 17-minute call, he claimed for transparency reasons. It really just handed the Thai military a pretext to escalate, especially as tensions within Thailand's own civil military structure was already high. So in the call, The then Thai Prime Minister referred to Hun Sen as uncle and sort of spoke disparagingly about her own generals who were not on the same page as she was, so in order to basically try to increase rapport. Now, what I haven't mentioned is that historically, Hun Sen and her family, her father and aunt, are very dear friends, were very dear friends of Hun Sen's. And in fact, Thaksin and Hun Sen have called each other god brothers. And there are rooms in Hun Sen's mansion named after the Thaksin and his sister Yingluck, who have stayed there. So I think she was going still on the idea of, our families are friends. We are not against one another. We have similar interests in terms of familial interests, and we're talking about decades of relationship. But that, instead of being taken as, let's simmer, let's lower the temperature, and we know each other. Hun Sen took it and exposed it, and I think he thought that this was going to either embarrass the Shinawat family, which it certainly did, but it would also curry favor, perhaps, on the side that somehow would see to it that they'd be driven from power. And there's what Supalak mentioned about those the conflicts of interest and so on, and the relationship. But there's also been talk about the fact that when Thaksin came back in 2023, suddenly there was an interest in casinos for Thailand, and that might have been seen as a problem for Hun Sen, because Thailand historically doesn't have casinos, doesn't entertain casinos, but Cambodia does, and the whole casino industry is a kind of dark economy sometimes of Cambodia's, which involves scam centers and other things. So this could have been seen as somehow getting into Hun Sen's territory, his bottom line, the money that's made at that level. So the conflict quickly spiraled beyond the border, and these border patrol disputes turned into coordinated airstrikes with F-16s on the Thai side, artillery on the Cambodian side, seemingly indiscriminate firing of artillery into civilian infrastructure damage, and the domestic political needs to express strength projection, particularly by Hun Sen and the Thai military, fueled a mutually reinforcing escalation loop. So what could have simply been resolved on a familial level, which had been the case in the past, instead spiraled out of control and really escalated into 40 plus casualties, hundreds of thousands of people displaced, terrible economic damage as a result of all this.
Thank you, Sophal, and appreciate you bringing up the phone call, which we will dig into the domestic implications for Thailand later. The PM has stepped away, and now we're looking at a potential change in government, so will be interesting to dig into that later in the conversation. So Benjamin, turning to you, many saw this conflict as a litmus test for ASEAN's ability to prevent conflict within the bloc, a promise that's already under fire for the body's inability to bring about an end to Myanmar's civil war. Now, Malaysia, this year's ASEAN chair, ultimately helped broker the ceasefire, but it took US President Trump's threats to end tariff negotiations to bring Thai and Cambodian officials to the negotiating table. China was also involved in the convening as an active participant in the dialogue and held a follow-up convening in Shanghai. Now, what does the ceasefire involve, and who is in charge of upholding it? And to what extent can we see this agreement as a testament to ASEAN leadership versus the product of international influence?
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Bryanna, and it's great. I think it's important to point out that despite the marked improvement that a ceasefire signals when contrasted with the deadly violence of just over a week ago, we need to keep in mind it's just a ceasefire after all, right? It's a cessation of active hostilities and nothing more. It doesn't presume to get to the root causes, or for that matter, even the proximate causes of the recent violence, right? So, we're often hearing about the stakes are much higher in this other context, right? But the fact that the Korean conflict has never been resolved with a treaty, right? There was a ceasefire, and therefore technically there's no end to that. There hasn't been a formal end to that conflict. By analogy, and looking at Sophal's analysis as well, going back to 1907, perhaps even 1904 at the Siamese maps as opposed to the French maps, we're talking about a dispute, a border dispute that's now 121 years old. The ceasefire in today's context strikes us all as very good news, welcome news, encouraging news. But important to keep in mind that it doesn't get us any closer to an actual lasting resolution to this dispute. It merely means the cessation of hostilities. We could call it a first and necessary step, but certainly an insufficient step toward that end. So I think that's first and foremost to be kept in mind. Second, to make matters a bit more discouragingly still, is that enforcement of the ceasefire really does come down to the two adversaries to uphold it, to Thailand and Cambodia. We saw from the results of yesterday's General Border Committee meeting, and frankly to my surprise, that both sides have agreed to, I think they're calling them ASEAN observers or monitors or something to that effect, that will be deployed to the region on the ground to monitor the adherence to and the compliance with the ceasefire. But again, as we've seen in other contexts, this will really come down to whether or not the two sides choose or otherwise to violate the ceasefire. We've seen since just the initial announcement of the ceasefire some days ago, both sides, not unlike they were doing before the conflict really kicked off in earnest on the 24th of July, accusing one another of violating the ceasefire. Chicken or egg, where did it start? Both sides are claiming the other has committed violations. Again, we've seen this around the world, but a lot of that is for posturing, a lot of that is for domestic political consumption. But at the end of the day, if these two sides don't have the political will to uphold it, then even the monitors from ASEAN will not be able to do the trick, as it were. I think the really important question here, and the most interesting question from my perspective, is how the ceasefire came about, right? Who's responsible for it? And I would argue that had any of the 5 countries that were involved not been involved, I'm not convinced we'd be having the same conversation today that we're having. Certainly Thailand, Cambodia, that goes without saying. But you have Malaysia representing ASEAN, we'll consider that one country, one entity, if you will, becoming involved. And that proved to be really critical. I think Prime Minister Anwar deserves a lot of credit, particularly when in 2008, the last time this dispute really reared its head, ASEAN came up a bit wanting, right? I know Cambodia in particular was looking for ASEAN to deliver a bit more in 2008, and it was disappointing in its inability to do so. So the ability of ASEAN in this case to initiate, which Prime Minister Anwar was doing even before the ceasefire was brought into effect, to initiate the talks and to lead them, I think is very important. And ASEAN in this case exists somewhere between, if you will, the multilateral approach that Cambodia was advocating, right? They were talking about the International Court of Justice again. They even mentioned the UN Security Council. In contrast to Thailand, which wanted a purely bilateral resolution to this conflict, ASEAN is somewhere in between, right? It's a compromise, happy medium solution to this, and it allowed both sides to compromise and to save face, as it were, in terms of what they were otherwise calling for as the right mechanism through which to resolve the conflict. America's involvement would appear to be purely coincidental to its tariff deadlines, rather than linked by any strategic considerations between trade deficits and this border dispute. But let's give credit where it's due. Leverage is leverage, and the U.S. used it to great effect in this situation. It's not difficult to imagine that this could have gone otherwise, right? That the Trump administration might have looked at these two countries and said, look, you've got a 49% tariff in place in the case of Cambodia, a 36% tariff in place in Thailand. And if you can't be bothered to resolve your domestic, or your bilateral border dispute in short order and deal with what we see as the more important issue, then we'll wash our hands of this altogether, and you'll be stuck with these really detrimental tariffs. And instead, what happened was the administration issued some threats, and lo and behold, both countries are now sitting with 19% tariffs, which under most circumstances would not be considered good news, but compared to what they were facing just a week or so ago, quite good news. And then you have China coming on board as well, which has tried to play a much more of a mediation role globally in recent years, and like the U.S., made no attempt to its credit, no attempt to really resolve the situation on its merits, right? It took a neutral approach and stuck with a narrowly defined goal of getting a ceasefire in place. And imagine had either one of those two great powers not become involved, the other's involvement would have then become a problem for both of those countries. Thailand is at least nominally, a treaty ally of the United States. Cambodia and Chinese relations are very tight and have been so for decades now in terms of Chinese influence and interests. And so they sort of serve to balance each other, if you will, cancel each other out, if you will, in both being involved. And they allowed, I think, both sides to further save face, if you will, domestically with their own constituents, in the same way they were able to point to ASEAN as a sort of compromise candidate between heavy multilateralism and pure bilateralism. They were able to say to their constituents, look, we've got both great powers involved. They're both flexing a bit of muscle and rather unusually doing so in the same direction, right? So we're not being used as pawns in some sort of geopolitical game. The great powers have spoken, and given our trade situations, it's in everyone's interest for us to get to the table and to get this ceasefire done. So, and you'll note that China and the U.S. both sent observers to yesterday's General Border Committee meeting as well. So I think it took a village, if you will, with all five countries getting involved, and I'm not sure it would have happened without all five getting involved at the same time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that analysis. And I appreciate the way that you were able to explain ASEAN's involvement, the U.S. and China's, without giving too much credit to any one party. Agreed. It did take a village to bring everyone to the negotiating table, and I hope that's continued to be recognized. So Sophal, last week you published an excellent op-ed in the Financial Times, which I encourage everyone to take a look at, in which you argue that the fighting between Thailand and Cambodia was not just a bilateral failure, but a systematic one for ASEAN. How does the organization need to adapt to better manage conflicts between its member states before they escalate into open fighting like it recently did on the Thai-Cambodia border?
Well, thanks, Bryanna. And I think a lot of this context has already been brought to bear by Ben in his answer to the earlier question. But, the ASEAN Charter is built on non-interference and consensus, which limits its ability to mediate crises among members, right? If one member says, I object, this becomes a problem. And it's been a problem in the case of Myanmar, because, how do you exclude somebody that can theoretically say, I don't want to be excluded, but they figured out a mechanism somehow to do that, or, forced it to agree to it. But here you have two members of ASEAN, Thailand and Cambodia, and so it just makes it very problematic. And so while this diplomatic posture preserves state sovereignty, the idea of non-interference and consensus, it comes at the expense of timely, meaningful intervention. ASEAN's structural limitations were again exposed in this conflict. I mean, this is kind of a recurring refrain, right? I mean, like, ASEAN just can't quite get the leverage or the traction it needs. And so despite the violence spilling into civilian zones and drawing international concern, ASEAN remained largely reactive. The bloc's chairman, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, eventually helped broker that ceasefire. And as Ben said, it was almost outside of his ASEAN hat that he was able to just, as Malaysian Prime Minister, intervene and call upon and convene the warring parties, but only after external powers, namely the U.S. and China, had already gotten involved or indicated that they weren't taking necessarily any sides. They just wanted things to stop, the fighting to stop. And as you know, in the case of the U.S., that those tariffs negotiations, it's just fortuitous timing in that you're in the middle of negotiations with the U.S. There's a deadline looming for both countries. And so Trump making that phone call, then posting on social media about it, kind of made both countries calm down a bit from their positions. And so to avoid future failures, ASEAN needs to consider, I think, three things: creating a standing rapid response mediation mechanism backed by credible leverage and staffed by trusted envoys. Second, empowering the ASEAN Secretariat with more independent authority to issue alerts, convene emergency meetings, summits, and verify ceasefire violations. And thirdly, institutionalizing military-to-military deconfliction mechanisms, especially along historically disputed borders. It's probably a lot to ask for of ASEAN at this point. And again, it's like, because of that non-interference and consensus foundation to ASEAN, everybody has to agree to this in order to make it work. But the reality is that ASEAN's current model truly is no longer it really no longer meets the moment when nationalism, disinformation, and military adventurism collide in a flashpoint region. So I think the lesson from the Financial Times op-ed that I published is really the idea that it was a bilateral failure, of course, two countries that have historical ties and aren't really truly supposed to be enemies somehow spiraled into a conflict and a very violent one compared to previous flashpoints, as I mentioned. But also, I think it's a failure of ASEAN. And the foreign minister of Singapore recently said, you can't put lipstick on this. This is a credibility problem for ASEAN when you have a regional body that's about promoting peace and cooperation and so on, unable to prevent this from happening. It isn't just we got here and now what are you going to do about it? But really, why isn't ASEAN as a regional body which has members that include Thailand and Cambodia unable to stop this from happening in the first place by creating the mechanisms that I mentioned earlier to prevent future conflict from erupting? And that's unfortunately where we are and where we've been with ASEAN for really since its founding.
Thank you. I agree with your point, and I think that Cambodia's decision to turn to the IJC after the May 28th shooting to just rule over the disputed temples is really a testament to the fact that people are turning outwards for internal ASEAN conflicts like this versus turning inwards to a body that's meant to prevent these. So our next question will be for Supalak, and it will be to unpack the complicated situation that is Thai domestic politics after the phone call between Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra and Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen. In the phone call, she called him uncle and accused the commander of Thailand's 2nd Army Region of inciting anti-government sentiment, which was not well received. With Shinawatra now out of office, what is in store for the future of her Pheu Thai party, and where does the military fit into all of this?
Well, I think this time of conflict with Cambodia poses a negative consequence to Thai politics in many ways. But I, from my point of view, that the conflict this time enhanced the role of military in 3 dimensions. On the political structure, the broke-up tribe, not only between the Shinawatra family and Hun family, also the also broke up tribe between the so-called civilian military relation between the ruling Pheu Thai party and the armed force. The leak of phone conversation between Prime Minister Paetongtarn and former Prime Minister Hun Sen posed a negative political consequence to a political structure. Look, now our Prime Minister was suspended from duties. That's a result of the kind of like a pretty unique political structure in Thailand that allowed the elite means the palace, military and monarchy nexus that influence over our political structure. And look again, after the cabinet reshuffle, after Paetongtarn suspensions, the government left the position of the defense minister vacant. I mean, vacancy of this kind of position express something different in the general politics because the government can no longer have its own people to command the military, leaving only the Deputy Defense Minister Kun Natapon. He is representing an armed force rather than any political party. Although he come into the office with quota of Prayut proxy, the Thai Unity Party, something Rom Thai Sanchat in Thai. So in this sense, we have like a representative of the armed force within the cabinet. And another dimension I like to pose is that to my view is the military also take over the task of the crisis management operation during the border flare-up situation, and then finally they managed to enhance the sense of militarism and patriotism in Thai society and enhance the public acceptance of the military role in handling the conflict with Cambodia. I will give you some example in an opinion poll conducted by the National Institute of Development Administration or NIDA, that university in June amid the conflict and political tension with Cambodia. So the result of that poll saying that majorities of Thai citizens, perhaps 62.5 of the 1,310 sampling, said they has more confidence in the armed force over the civilian government. That's only 11.9% of the confidence. People saying that only 11% has high level of confidence in the civil. I think that probably has a very serious impact on our plan to reform, to have a military reform from now on. Pheu Thai Party and the opposition People Party always champion for the reform agenda to downsize the military, to have the strengthen, and more important, to withdraw the armed force from the politics. I think from now on, it's very difficult for the political parties or even other civil or even people like a public opinion to say, well, we cannot perhaps from now on have any chance to enforce our reform agenda in the military. So that's a very serious situation for Thai. From now on, I expect that in the next few months, if Prime Minister Paetongtarn was removed by the court from the position, we were going to have a deadlock because the next party in line is Phum Chai Thai now in outside because withdraw that from the government, and there will be creates another deadlock because Pheu Thai cannot have any other person. Still, they have another candidate to replace Paetongtarn, but I'm not quite sure Ajahn Chai Kasem will have ability to lead again, and I think probably it will create a deadlock that's open a chance for intervention from outside. This is kind of observation and speculation also looming large in Thai politics right now. I will stop here first for this script.
Thank you. On the deadlock that we're kind of seeing, Benjamin, a follow-up question for you is what could these potential changes mean for the U.S.-Thailand relationship?
Well, we haven't seen a lot of activity vis-a-vis the U.S. and Thailand over the course of the first 6 or 7 months of the new Trump administration. The most involvement has been, as it has been in most of the rest of the world, on the trade and tariff front, and we've just seen a great deal of hands-on involvement in the past week in Thailand by the U.S. With respect to the tariffs, and as I mentioned before, continued involvement by the U.S. in the way of observers of the General Border Committee meeting. So. It looks like, in many respects, the ball's in the Trump administration's court when it comes to this relationship at the moment, because clearly it's emphasizing the trade and tariff aspect of the relationship. It seems to have done that to both sides' relative satisfaction over the course of the past week. Certainly, it's it certainly is not in Thailand's interest, never mind the tariffs or the trade situation, to have this conflict continue if it wants to be able to conduct its international affairs with other countries, not least the United States and China, and be able to do so in a manner that's, free of distractions on the border, if you will. So it's an open field. Last time Trump came to power, it took a little while for Thailand to sort of find its way onto the agenda, but it did eventually. And I expect if the ceasefire holds, then when Thailand does come up again, perhaps in the context of the ASEAN summit in October, there'll be other things to talk about. I think that will be of mutual benefit to both countries without the border dominating the conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Okay. So just a reminder to the attendees, we'll be moving to our Q&A session shortly. So if you want to send in your questions to the box below, please do. Our next question is back to Sophal on kind of a similar vein, talking about the U.S.-Cambodia relationship. So earlier this week, Cambodian Deputy Prime Minister Sun Chanthol stood before reporters and thanked not China or ASEAN for broking the ceasefire, but Donald Trump, and insisted that he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. U.S.-Cambodian relations have weakened in recent years as Cambodia has bolstered its relationship with China. What does this mean, and could it signal a shift in U.S.-Cambodian relations?
Right. Well, I think it's a cheap way of currying favor, right? You nominate somebody that really wants to be the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize and keeps talking about it constantly because, his arch nemesis wanted and he feels he deserves it more and so on. But it's really too early to say that this represents a definitive shift. It does signal a recalibration insofar as Cambodia and China have been very close for over a decade and have had, even far earlier relations, but that the current sort of incredibly close relationship is more recent insofar as the last decade or so. And at least it's seen as a trial balloon. The public embrace of Trump, well, that actually started in the first administration when then Prime Minister Hun Sen said that Trump was going to be, the great president and would bring peace to the world and so on. So he's been trying so hard to get Trump's attention. So this was just easy to throw out there, especially through something as high profile as a Nobel nomination, which allows Cambodia to test the waters with Washington without formally abandoning its deep ties to Beijing. I'm sure she isn't saying why aren't you nominating me for the Nobel Peace Prize, right? I mean, nobody's going to care about that. And in any case, nobody thinks in Phnom Penh, at least, that the Nobel Committee is going to seriously give any attention to this particular nomination. But, for years, Cambodia has grown increasingly aligned with China, benefiting from vast infrastructure loans, the Belt and Road Initiative, military cooperation and political cover at the UN, thanks to China. So meanwhile, relations with the U.S. soured, particularly after the 2017 crackdown on opposition parties and civil society, and there have been sanctions, visa bans, public criticism from Washington that followed. In fact, the last time that Trump really, I think, said something positive about Cambodia was during COVID, when Cambodia was the only country that took in this cruise ship that was being denied ports of call everywhere, and people were stranded for what seemed like weeks. Finally, Cambodia was the good guy and saying, you can come here and you can disembark here. And there was a tweet from Trump at the time praising Cambodia, but I don't think anything happened from that. There was no extra nice treatment of Cambodia as a result. Status conscious and often skeptical of multilateralism. So it resonates with certain elements of the Cambodian leadership. So Sun Chanthal's praise for Trump isn't just flattery. It's a strategic attempt to bypass traditional diplomatic style, is very transactional, status conscious, and often skeptical of multilateral figure who has shown a willingness to reward personal loyalty and grand gestures. At a minimum, it could thaw some of the political ice between Phnom Penh and Washington, particularly in the way that it's always been about human rights, but of course, Trump doesn't care about human rights in Cambodia. So maybe it can reset that. And of course, Phnom Penh is very, very happy that, Voice of America is completely hobbled, if not dismantled, that Radio Free Asia and the same thing. These are all thorns in his side that Trump has very kindly removed. He wasn't thinking about Cambodia. He was thinking about other things. But, this is great for the existing regime in the sense that these thorns are gone. And so it's just a way for the Cambodian People's Party, which has ruled Cambodia for decades, to showcase itself as pragmatic and globally connected, not beholden to China, but capable of pivoting if needed. Still it's worth noting that while Trump's threats of tariffs may have jolted both sides into accepting a ceasefire, the broader architecture of U.S.-Cambodia relations remains fragile. One flattering nomination won't erase years of mistrust, nor will it immediately lead to a trade breakthrough. It might be the first page of a new chapter, or at least a footnote that changes the tone, if not the content of that relationship.
The relationship and its evolution will certainly be interesting to watch over the coming days and weeks. So thank you for that. Supalak, did you have something to say?
Yes, Brian, thank you. Actually, I want to raise some questions about the role of China. Both of you, Benjamin and Sophal, talk pretty much about the role of the U.S. this time. We saw the hands of the U.S. from Washington. China also have some role, I think, but from Thailand part, our government, the cabinet a few days ago approved the requirements of the Chinese submarine. It's a long-delayed submarine project that eventually, I think, benefits to China a lot and allow more accessibility of China into Thai military facilities in the Gulf of Thailand. I'd like to hear from you both. China's role in Cambodia, it seemed to me like Phnom Penh tried to have some kind of leaning to the U.S. in this time, and in order to get out of the orbit of China. Thank you. If you can share this.
Sure, I'll take a crack at it, Supalak. I think there was so much hope when Hun Manet, the son of Hun Sen, the oldest son of Hun Sen, who is a West Point graduate, NYU, Masters in Econ, PhD from the University of Bristol, UK, came into the prime ministership, right? I mean, it was seen as like, could this be an opening? And then nothing happened. And in fact, they still have Cambodian American Thierry Sang imprisoned there. She's a University of Michigan law attorney, and so it just seemed like it wasn't going anywhere. But they've constantly had these signals of like, maybe there's interest, maybe there's an opening, and I think one of the indications of something maybe being afoot is that last year in 2024, there was no new Belt and Road Initiative money coming in from China. And so this was seen as, wait, is China signaling that it doesn't quite trust what's happening in Cambodia as like business as usual, and willingness to always say yes if you want the Funan Techo Canal, for example, this massive, I think it's $1.7 billion project cutting across Cambodia to create access to the ocean from Phnom Penh, as opposed to having to go to Vietnam to ship out. Maybe somehow this project isn't getting the funding that it needs from China, and this was seen as like, maybe it's not this is not an inadequate vote of confidence from Beijing towards the existing regime. But look, bandwagoning, balancing all the needs of countries to kind of signal that we're not 100% or we want to have options. This is perhaps Cambodia's way of doing it. It's a low cost or virtually free way of doing it. When you nominate somebody for a prize, what does it cost you? Nothing, So it's easy, but if one were to say, there's been a radical shift, no, it hasn't happened yet, but it's always there. I mean, they would like to signal that they're more open to it. Of course, this has a problem towards, this poses a problem towards Beijing. If they want to have more confidence in Phnom Penh's loyalty, this might pose as a, hey, wait, you're not 100% with us, perhaps, but again, very low cost, easy way to maintain relationship or improve, upgrade that relationship.
And maybe I'll jump in for just a moment, and in deference to both the time as well as to a question in the chat that concerns China in its role in the resolution of this dispute, or at least in getting to a ceasefire. There's a question as to what's motivating China in all of this, and I think look, China wants to avail itself of any opportunity it can to be a productive and to be seen as being a productive member of the geographical region in which both Thailand and Cambodia sit, right? There are conflicts in the South China Sea to which China is a party. Although Cambodia and Thailand are not party to those conflicts, that does affect ASEAN as a whole. And China certainly wants to be mindful of its reputation vis-a-vis the rest of ASEAN and its member states in terms of how it deals with those conflicts. One area in which Thailand and Cambodia actually do agree, albeit usually behind closed doors, is on some concern as to what China is doing on the Mekong River with respect to water resource management, joint security patrols, etc. China has been a productive player in many respects on the river, but there is some concern between both of those countries about China's role, and China is aware of that. And so to have an opportunity to play a constructive role in this particular conflict in some ways pays dividends, hopefully indirectly from China's perspective on how it's perceived on the Mekong River and in the Mekong subregion more broadly. You have China's involvement in the Ream Naval Base in Cambodia, which of course is in Cambodia. You've got its involvement in the Myanmar Civil War, which is on Thailand's western border. All of these things can advertently or inadvertently compromise China's reputation in the two countries. So its motivation for getting involved here, in addition to wanting to be involved where the U.S. is involved, right? As I mentioned that before, in a weird sort of way, China's position, I think, was bolstered by the U.S. getting involved because it made its involvement appear to be less interfering and less threatening when the other great power is equally involved. But again, I think China is looking to take every opportunity to present a benign and constructive face to a region that sometimes can see it as being less so.
Interesting. Supalak, thank you for asking that question and bringing in the question from the chat. I know China's involvement is something we're all watching closely, especially in the light of the U.S.'s role in bringing people to the ceasefire. All right, so one last question for all three panelists, and it's a rapid question for a very, very complex, century-long issue. But what would a politically realistic resolution or long-term stabilization of the border issue look like? So Supalak, maybe we'll start with you and then go around to Sophal and then Benjamin.
Actually, I don't know what kind of the permanent solution for this kind of chronic conflict between the two countries on the boundaries. Only thing that we have the Thailand perhaps need to compromise and flexibility on the boundary demarcation with Cambodia, and sometimes Thai people too much upset with the historical pain of the Pravihia case. So in this case, we cannot overcome our historical pain after the loss of the Pravihia temple. We also fear of the map, the French map 200,000 scale. That's so a fearsome for all Thai people, including our elites. We cannot refer the case to the ICJ. The ICJ, for me, it's a peaceful resolution that can manage the thing, right? Many people, but I don't know why Thai people are too upset with that. Probably here temple and ICJ and the map. I don't know. I asked many senior officials why we cannot fight with Cambodia in the court. It is the best way for the country which has a boundary conflict to go there. I try to propose the others international mechanism like a PCA also to many officials in Thailand. Is it possible we refer the case to the ASEAN, like we have the a kind like a flexible or compromise the organization or mechanism to settle our borderly. Otherwise, we leave the thing on the market. It could be spark a conflict easily all the time. Frankly speaking, if Thailand cannot overcome our historical pain on the Pravihir temple, on the ICJ, on the map, I think it's very difficult to have any kind of solution. I'm not have a full faith in a mechanism like a regional mechanism like ASEAN as we did. We also just, we are a member of ASEAN, of course, but Thailand, its psychological problem of Thai elite is that we cannot allow the outsider to interfere our internal problem. That's a key issue for me.
Thank you. Sophal?
Yeah. Well, I think they're just really fascinating. Sort of the prospect of a long-term resolution would be, ceasefire, consolidation, and verification, right? So the first thing is, before anything else, the July 28th ceasefire has to be formalized and verifiable, and there has to be third-party monitoring. There has to be reaffirmation of military disengagement protocols and buffer zones, and there has to be immediate release of all detained personnel. Apparently, 18 Cambodian soldiers still held by Thailand. Secondly, there has to be reinvigoration of the General Border Committee, that meeting that Ben talked about that took place. Yes, that mechanism, that committee has to be reinvigorated, and there's got to be demarcation of remaining border segments based on a mutually agreed map. So you just can't get anywhere without that, and joint patrols to avoid accidental incursions. You've got to have communication hotline to resolve incidents rapidly. Then you need legal mechanisms and precedents. The ICJ's 1962 and 2013 rulings on Pravihir offer important precedents. It would be nice if Thailand were to agree to it. I completely agree with Supalak there. I mean, it's just kind of weird. One side goes to the International Court of Justice, and the other side just says, we don't want to take part in this. Then there has to be ASEAN-led diplomatic normalization. ASEAN, despite this criticism I've expressed about its work, must own the mediation process to preserve its legitimacy and credibility. And this would include creating a permanent conflict resolution secretariat, some kind of drafting binding confidence building measures, some ASEAN-wide endorsement of code of conduct for land borders, much like the South China Sea Code of Conduct, which of course is its own problematic area, but at least there's not China involved in this case. And then you've got to have economic re-engagement and confidence building. The whole idea of the place that I teach, Thunderbird, for example, is that borders frequented by trade and diplomacy seldom need soldiers. You've got to come back to this idea that, again, trade and diplomacy, this is more the way to go than sending fighter jets and rockets and mortar and artillery. And then you've got to have domestic political stabilization, which we've talked about extensively in this meeting. And external powers have got to exercise strategic restraint. And so far we've seen that, right? I mean, neither the United States nor China have said, we want to tip the scales on this country's side or another country's. We just want you guys to stop fighting. But that, of course, doesn't mean positive peace. It just means negative peace, the absence of violence, which doesn't lead to the full resolution of the problems themselves. You've got to get to the root cause of the problem to really find peace.
Thank you, Sophal. And then Benjamin will leave you with the last word.
Well, thank you. I agree with my two colleagues' analysis. I would, in terms of what needs to happen, you mentioned the word politically realistic, right? Which gives me some pause. I'm optimistic that the ceasefire will hold. I think that both sides have had enough. I think that the political dividends that the conflict has paid for both sides domestically have largely been realized for both sides, and that any return to hostilities would the cost-benefit analysis of that from a domestic political standpoint would not be in favor of either two countries domestically. But I would focus on the domestic situation. I mean, what my colleagues have talked about today is what would need to happen internationally and in terms of resolving the border conflict on its merits. And I agree with all of what they've said, but I think there's a contradiction here in that, from an international perspective, it is clearly in Thailand's and Cambodia's interest to maintain this ceasefire and, in fact, to resolve the conflict substantively. It's bad for their image. It's bad for trade and investment, as the Trump administration has made clear. It's bad for tourism, which is particularly important for Thailand and its economic recovery after COVID-19. And it's bad for its citizens on the ground, right? For them to get on with their lives and livelihoods, as Kun Supalak can attest. But these things, this assumes that Thailand and Cambodia are monolithic, right? That they're monoliths, and that what's good for the country, quote unquote, is going to be what transpires. And in fact, we know that they are not monolithic, that they're riven with various factions and interest groups that have interests in this conflict continuing. If not the ceasefire being broken, then at least a sort of tit-for-tat exchange and some tension on the border, and don't want the root causes of this to be resolved because they are politically convenient to be raised at various times in the future, be it for personal reasons, political reasons, even profit-seeking reasons, right? It would be an oversimplification to refer to this entire dispute over the past several weeks or months as merely the internationalization of two separate domestic political conflicts, right? It's more complex than that. But that is indisputable that this conflict and the hostilities have been to the political advantage of different factions on different sides of the border. And until that ceases to be the case, we're probably stuck with a ceasefire, which in some ways, even though the word probably hasn't been used for 120 years, we've had in place for over a century, meaning that at any given time, this could kick off again when it becomes politically convenient. So I think the root causes lie on the two separate sides of the border as opposed to on the non-demarcated border itself.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, the Thailand and Cambodia have wrapped up the meeting of the General Border Commission in KL, and they've agreed to meet with regional army commanders to meet again in 2 weeks for follow-up discussions. So hopefully we'll see some of these issues addressed and proposed solutions brought into the conversation then, when I know we'll all be watching the ceasefire very closely until then. So thank you to our excellent panelists for what was a great conversation. I wish we could talk for another hour. I know everyone has a lot more to say, and there are a lot more questions in the chat. In the meantime, stay tuned to the ASPE website for more analysis and webinars. This webinar will be posted to our YouTube channel, so please share.